Guys ready? And here we go. Welcome, everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for your monthly Kubernetes office hours. This is the live stream where we hop onto YouTube and we decide to try to answer as many of your questions as possible, as quickly as possible. So we are in #office-hours on slack.kates.io. Just hop on there. You'll get an invite and you can join us. Then you can hop in the Slack channel, which we are streaming here on the side. Where's that? It's over here. You should see that in the live stream video. And we'll try to answer as many of your questions. So we're going to quickly introduce our panel, and then we will get started. Kick it off for me, Bob.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I am a research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. Been playing with Kubernetes for quite a while now. Sort of my specialty is things like on-prem deployments, federation, multi-cluster, and all sorts of sort of crazy stuff in between. I also work with Jeff, if you can tell.
Mm-hmm. Hello. I may as well go next. My name is Jeffrey Sika. I also work at the University of Michigan. Also been working with Kubernetes for quite some time and container technology in general. My main thing is batch jobs, kind of on-prem deployments like Bob, and lately I've been doing a lot with SIG release and the dashboard.
Hi, I'm Puya from GiantSwarm, currently sitting in Germany, a developer advocate and product owner, and I mainly work with Kubernetes on AWS, Azure, and on-prem, and take care of some security stuff.
Hi, I'm Joel Speed. I work for Pusher out of our London office. I'm a cloud infrastructure engineer, and I've been working with Kubernetes for about 2 years now. Done a lot of stuff to do with like auto-scaling, authentication. More recently, been doing a bunch of stuff with Kube Builder and controller runtime and that kind of stuff, building some custom controllers and CRD stuff. And this week, I'm working on deploying Prowl for us, which has been fun.
I'm Chris Carty. I'm a senior developer with the City of Ottawa. I've been using Kube for the last year, 2 years. Mostly do on-prem deployments on our local infrastructure and looking to reach out to Azure. So if you have any questions there, I'm happy to help answer.
Hi, I'm Pavlos. I'm from Lithuania. I work for a company called Utility Warehouse. I mainly do like Kubernetes and everything related to instrumentation. I'm maintainer of Thanos and help Prometheus guys to basically instrument Kubernetes.
Hi, I'm Ilya Dmitrichenko from VWorks, based out of London, and I've been doing various things with Kubernetes since 2014, and most recently I've been busy working on EKS Control, which is a tool for bootstrapping EKS clusters very easily. So yeah, and I've touched various areas in the past.
Awesome. And Imran, are you going to be joining us today on the panel, or are you just listening in?
Hi, my name is Imran. I just joined in first time, so I'm new to Kubernetes. I've been using it for almost a year now, so looking to contribute. So that's where I'm exploring all my avenues.
Awesome. And I'm your host, George Castro. I'm a community manager at VMware that gets to work on Kubernetes. So before we start, thanks everyone who's joining us in the live chat. Please feel free to introduce yourselves. Tell us where you're from, what you're working on. We always love to see that kind of stuff. And let's just go over some quick ground rules here. We're going to go about an hour today. This is a judgment-free zone, so everyone had to start from somewhere. So if someone's asking questions that you feel are too basic, help them out. Don't be a bad judge. We will do our best to answer your questions. However, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster, so we're not going to like try to live debug and SSH into your cluster or anything like that. However, what we will do is do our best to get you moving to whatever the next step you need to go to find out how to fix your problem. So maybe where to find your logs, how to debug certain things, and kind of generally at least try to point you in the right direction. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experiences, your pro tips. Anything you've broken in production is always helpful. Same with all of the those of you listening in the Slack channel. If you have an experience in this area, we love it when you just stick whatever information you have in the Slack channel. You can help us out by pasting URLs to the official docs, blogs. We like to link up to GitHub projects when someone asks, hey, what's a good thing to use for this? Feel free to just whack all that in there. What I do at the end is I grab all the URLs and put them in the show notes to publish with the video. It just helps out because there's so many things out there in the Kubernetes ecosystem. It's always great when the rest of the audience helps us collect as much information as possible. You can post your questions on discuss.kubernetes.io. If you're not on Slack, we watch that thread. In fact, Bob is about to paste a link to the Discuss thread into the Slack so you have it. Those of you listening in the stream, that's just a Slack channel there on the side. There's about a 1 or 2 minute delay. So sometimes what might happen is you'll ask your question. We might have a question for you to get more information, and then we'll go on to another question while you gather your information, and then we'll get back to you. If at any time you keep asking a question and for some reason we don't see it, please let us know. Start putting emojis, use all caps, whatever it is to need. We don't purposely skip questions. We try to address them all as we can. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm being told that Zoom is going to kick us out in about a half hour. So the stream will do a quick interruption.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? What happened? Okay, all right. Do we want to go now, or do we want to kick off? Do we want to stop and go now?
I would restart now.
Okay, all right. All right, give us a second. How are we going to do this? What? Are we just restarting the meeting with the same Zoom URL, or am I creating a brand new one?
I would create a brand new one and make sure it's under like Kubernetes Zoom or some other.
Okay, so I'm doing that. So everyone stand by. I'm going to pause the stream for 1 second, and we will be right back.
That's better.
Is it?
Back.
So
No,
don't
George,
see a
though.
difference. But there is now a Kubernetes Zoom user.
That's okay. That's my other computer. Okay, are we okay? Are we ready to start now? Sorry about that, everybody.
Yep.
Audience,
Are
please
we
let
live,
us.
live?
We are live because we never stop streaming. We just killed the Zoom.
We're missing one panelist.
Okay. Imam was his name. I will try. Let's get the questions going, and I'll find him on Slack and send him.
Yeah.
So, chat, how are we sounding? Sorry about that technical issue. That is definitely my fault because that's 2 times in a row. All right, Matt says sound is good. Are we ready to get started? Let's get the HackMD open. The first question comes from Edward T. Edward, I recognize your name. Thanks for stopping by again. Says, what's the best practice regarding secrets in Helm value files?
So yeah, there is this issue that is fixed, by the way, in Helm 3, which is now in alpha and will be hopefully finished by end of this year, or even by Helm Summit, which is in September. Until then, secrets at some point, latest when you apply them with Tiller, will stay public. There is no differentiation between config and secrets in Helm currently. There is no real workaround either. We have some workaround at Transform, but in the end, once you get it into Helm and to Tiller, you need a single values file, and there is no way to encrypt that. What you could do is basically use the etcd encryption not only for secrets, but also for config maps. So at least you get it encrypted in etcd. But still in in cache, they won't be encrypted, I think. So, because config maps won't be treated the same as secrets.
The other thing that like I've seen as a common practice is actually creating the secrets first and then managing them sort of separately from your, Helm, like anything related to Helm.
Right. Yeah. If you just create the secrets outside of Helm and reference them from your Helm deployments, that's definitely a good workaround.
It's the most common one that I've seen.
Is anyone using that in conjunction with something like Vault, just to kind of keep the secrets over there?
I remember a Twitter thread recently where Joe Bida was saying keeping secrets in Vault is a kind of a not so good practice.
I know what thread you're referring to, and that was specifically giving service accounts.
Service accounts, yes. Right.
Like the ability to pull from Vault directly. And some of the there's work currently being done to help sort of improve all that with being able to like dump multiple tokens into sort of the standard location for Kubernetes secrets.
Yeah, I think you will be able to replace the default storage for secrets. There was a KubeCon talk on that in Barcelona, I think.
No, I'm sorry, not default. The service account being able to have multiple tokens or multiple like identities attached to it.
Yeah, Edward's asking if anyone has a link to the Twitter thread that you're discussing. That would be an interesting thing to add.
I can dig it up.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Just a small one. Just like in GitLab, you can put the values in kind of the environment variable. You might be able to sub that into the values file of that, so it's never stored in your values chart if you're putting that in Git.
Okay. Anything else on this one? All right, Ayush Verma, thanks for joining us. Pod-to-pod communication is disabled in the latest version of Kubernetes, and I'm sure many would have encountered this issue while running the latest version. I'm not able to find a workaround for AWS. I'm using kops to set up my cluster, and then they sent this link here for server fault. So anyone want to take a stab at this one?
I'm not aware that this is the case, actually. Is this in kops? Because by default, usually pod-to-pod communication is not disabled unless you have, I don't know, some very restrictive network policies.
Does anyone know if kops installs a CNI by default? Because I think it's based on kubeadm now, isn't it? Which I don't think does. So I think once you brought up the cluster, you have to choose a CNI to install.
So it might be the missing
I think
CNI.
kops had kubenet by default. The kube router. Not kube router, the other one that Justin Santa Barbara wrote. I forgot which one the default, but yeah, you have to choose it. But I think there was a default definitely. It's more like kubenet, I think. More likely to be kubenet than anything.
But it shouldn't disallow pod-to-pod communication. Right.
Certainly not.
That might be a different issue you're seeing there, Ayush. Maybe we might see something if you post logs, or I don't know.
Yep, there are some. He's posted in the thread where he asked the question. He posted a picture where it says, if your cluster is running Kubernetes version 1.9, the automatic firewall rules have changed to disallow workloads in a GKE cluster.
That was specifically to talk to VMs in like another network. Like
okay. So that's not it, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, so Joel's given you the recommendation to double check you have a CNI installed. There's one from the list on this page. Ayush, if you could check, hold on, it looks like he's pasting more information.
I think that's still the to VM communication thing and not actually for pod-to-pod. So I was playing with kubeadm a lot recently, and when you do set it up initially, you don't get pod-to-pod communication until you've installed the CNI.
Okay.
So that really screams that to me. But.
Okay, so I think the first step then, Ayush, is check to see if you have a CNI installed, and then let us know, and then we'll come back to this. Does that sound okay? All right. All right, moving on. Pierre asks, hello there. I recently started looking into Kubernetes, and at this point, I have a basic knowledge of how it works. We have a use case where we're looking to implement a self-service managed platform to provide our users with virtual machines in our on-premise data center through an interface. In other words, we're trying to create a self-service solution equivalent to the EC2 console that you find in AWS. I know there are other platforms there like OpenStack that can provide something similar, but we want also a solution that will easily allow us to have multiple environments, dev, prod, QA, etc., for this managed platform, and thus easily have a CI/CD pipeline where we can create, test, and deploy new configurations across the environments. So he wants the whole thing. After looking into Kubernetes and seeing how easy it is to create and manage containers, we were thinking to provide these virtual machines to our users in the form of containers. Is this use case something that Kubernetes is suitable for or even recommended? Do you know of other similar use cases where Kubernetes was used? So I think we can start off with the differences, I guess, between infrastructure as a service, OpenStack-ish, and what Kubernetes provides. So who wants to take a stab at this one?
I can. So I think like Kubernetes has a concept of nodes, right? And like a single virtual machine would be a Kubernetes node. It has like CPU, it has memory, it has like everything attached, and you have like this one node. Now, what the question says, we want to do like a single container would spin up a node. So that's like a bit of a different concept, but I think it would be possible to implement that using like virtual kubelet, I think. Once you like...
Virtlet would be one of those solutions. Virtual kubelet is rather to have kubelets that are that you don't see. Virtlet would be a solution. There is others where you can spin up a VM instead of a container. Some people put QEMU tooling in a Docker container and spin up a VM so that. Those are not really the use cases for Kubernetes though, and there are very few people who are doing that as far as I know.
Definitely more of an edge case.
Yeah.
There are people exploring and doing that sort of thing, but it's not what people are generally doing.
Yeah, you might want to check out, I think Mirantis was working on things in that direction because they come from the OpenStack area. I'm not sure who else is currently working in that direction.
There is other stuff like people are using Kubernetes to essentially manage OpenStack as an interface to have like a uniform way of doing it, but that's still, I don't think there is anything out there already that covers your exact use case.
Yeah, like you would definitely have to implement a lot of code in order to achieve this. But I think it's like doable, but it would be hard.
Yeah, also what I add, it would depend on what the workloads look like from the people who want to consume the platform. If they're already all containerized, which I doubt because that would be too perfect, right? Then just giving them Kubernetes is fine. But if you have a mix of really stateful workloads, some people move into containers, some not, then you have to kind of do the judgment call there. And it's totally perfectly fine. I know some people don't like this, to have a thing that does VMs and have a Kubernetes side by side instead of trying to do a thing together. I know a lot of people do use Kubernetes to drive OpenStack and the other way around, but you have to make that judgment call based on the complexity of the thing that you're building. And for a lot of people, Kubernetes is hard. OpenStack is also hard. Doing them together,
I think one of the big selling points is if you can have, that ideal one single API to rule them all, and that API is through Kubernetes. I think that is incredibly compelling and what is driving a lot of people to try and do this. But at the same time, there is complexity maintaining it for everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of mirroring your point, just giving a little bit more into why it's happening. It might work for you, but I would bet it's probably going to be a lot more complicated.
I dropped a link in chat to KubeVirt, which is has started down this path. Mm-hmm. I would say take a look at that and sort of start there.
Yeah, good idea.
Yep. So hopefully that helps at least partially answer your question. Feel free to post a follow-up. We always like to answer follow-ups as well. Awesome. Matt, welcome back. First of all, he wants to say thanks for pointing me to Harbor last session. I had my private image repo up and running, and it works much better, easier than the Docker repo. Awesome. I think you're like the first person to come back and actually thank us, or maybe the second, but that's always nice. Thanks, we appreciate that. His question is, I've been testing Kubernetes version upgrades with kubesplay/Ansible playbook. Everything works fine up to version 13.7. But anything 14 and all the nodes go through a not ready cycle every 3 to 5 minutes. I've not found anything about a bug. Do you know if there is cause for this?
I already asked in the thread which infrastructure this is on, but it might be anything. I mean, there is no general bug in 1.14 that would let nodes crash. We run it in production. I guess a lot of others do too. GKE does it too, but I have...
To echo Max Guy's suggestion in the thread, I would definitely pop into the KubeSpray channel too. They'll have a lot more knowledge on managing nodes and the upgrade, like everything that's involved in the upgrade process there.
I would also take a look at kubectl describe node and see what's the reason of why it popped back to not ready state, because describing the node would give some helpful output.
They're bare metal Dell servers. I would definitely hop into KubeSpray, or check out pop over to Kubernetes SIG's KubeSpray and see if there's anyone else sort of encountering this issue specifically in that repo.
Can you toss in the link to the KubeSpray repo? That'd be great. Thanks. And click on issues. All right. Any other tips for Matt?
Martin mentions they're using 1.14.2 on bare metal and it works fine. So yeah, it might be a very specific problem to their setup.
Okay. So let us know how that works out. We are moving on. Meh BD, I guess is how you say that name. Our Docker images contain some data, i.e. within /data, and we create the pod with persistent volumes. The /data content is dropped by Kubernetes, same concept as a mount command. Some of you know how we bypass this feature and merge the existing data with the new one when a new pod is created? Thanks in advance for your reply.
I think what they're doing is there is already data in the image, and once you mount a volume to that, no matter if it's persistent or not, you will overwrite that that folder in the image. So either you don't, either you just don't mount a volume to the /data, or you move, which would be the better solution, move the data out of the image and put it in in a different way into the persistent volume.
More specifically, it'd be good to see their configuration. What is it they have in their pod spec, and see what is being done there. Because I don't think Kubernetes, even if they declared, and what the Docker file looks like, even if they declared volume /data in your Docker file, Kubernetes wouldn't do anything about that automatically with it.
No, it won't.
No, I think they're mounting in the manifest, but
yeah,
we would need to see both. I think the Docker file and the Kubernetes manifest.
Yeah, because if we would mount a directory in Docker file and then the same with persistent volume, then it would be empty, right? So I think that might be the issue.
This gives me a follow-up question from my casualness. I've always been taught or have learned never to put data into your images and containers. Can you all expand on this a little bit? Are there cases where this might be a good idea? I'm just kind of curious if they inherited this image from somewhere else. What it feels like just separating that would solve a lot of subtle problems maybe you might see in the future.
I guess a big one would be you don't have to rebuild your container every time you change the data. So having it outside into a config map or volume mount would kind of solve that problem. So as your containers spin up and down, they just pull from there instead of needing a rebuild.
Yeah, also, if we have like data which never changes, then like Dockerfile might be a good approach, because persistent volumes might not be working, for example, on bare metal cases, or yeah, and basically you would have to actually mount the same volume, which would like be or NFS or like Ceph or some similar system. Then it would actually do like calls to that system instead of actually just having the data in the Dockerfile.
And hopefully that data in there is not secrets, right? That would be really bad. Yeah.
And
okay.
usually from the olden days of containers without Kubernetes, it was already kind of the reason why volumes were introduced into Docker was because data shouldn't live inside the image. Mm-hmm. There is very few use cases like mentioned that would make it maybe okay. And then maybe you need to separate folders and have some of your image data in /data and some in /something else, to separate between the ones that are fixed and the ones that will change and that will will be persistent only on an infrastructure level and not on a container level.
This is more as a general container Docker thing. I'm actually strongly against using the volume directive in sort of your Docker file or like manifest, just because by default, every time you spin up an instance, even if like you're not managing in Kubernetes and you're just doing Docker native, it'll create a new volume using the default volume driver for Docker on the host, and those aren't cleaned up when you delete the container. So it's really easy to like, you know, burn through space or forget about them unless you're doing like the Docker volume, was it RM or cleanup or prune? There we go. Docker volume prune to like remove all those sort of dangling things.
Or Docker RM minus V, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, similarly, like I mean, I guess that at least does something, because if you use ports, then if you declare a port in your Docker file, it's kind of almost completely pointless. Only Docker exposes that automatically, right? So it doesn't care about it. Some of those volumes, yeah. So volumes of port probably be things that you would want to check in your Docker file linter. There are a few options there.
All right, moving on to our next question. If you're just joining us, this is the Kubernetes office hours. We are in #office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack. Please feel free to ask your questions. I see lots of questions queuing up in my document. Hopefully, Bob, we're caught up to date. But moving on to our next question from Tarun Pothulpati, a student from India. Welcome. It says, recently I've been trying to create a CRD operator. I have a CR which depends on another. Users should be able to reference the dependent CR in the independent CR's definition. If the dependent resource is already created, they would have to reference it by name. Otherwise, they should declare it right in the independent resources spec. Is there a way to do that? Any suggestions?
I don't think you can do that. You can either have object references or just references that you use, and or you can declare it like you would do a pod spec in a deployment resource. But doing both, that is most probably not possible, or at least I wouldn't know of a way to do that. And it would also be strange because you most probably you had a reason to have them in two resources, and then declaring two resources in a single resource, there's that sounds like going back to expecting that to be a single resource. So maybe you should think of, is it actually two resources? And if not, put them together. Or if it's two resources, do not depend on each other hard. So be able to either crash or work without the dependent.
So I was reading this and thinking about some like different use cases and what kind of thing that could be. So as like you sort of mentioned, the deployment, you have the pod spec in there and the deployment creates the pod spec or creates the pod even from that pod spec. That's kind of one relationship you can have between CRDs, although those aren't CRDs. Or you can have something like in, say, Cert Manager, where you have a certificate references an issuer. And if the issuer doesn't exist, then Cert Manager just sits there until the issuer exists and just says, I can't do anything because the issuer doesn't exist.
Exactly.
That's the kind of thing I would probably suggest you do, one or the other, though it depends on what the relationship between them is, because those are two quite different relationships. One of them, the first, the deployment, it's creating those pods, it owns those pods, it manages them. Whereas the second relationship, it's more just using them. So I just thought I posted on the thread just saying what actually is the use case. If you could tell us a little bit more, it should be created based on the config, in which case I would do it as the sort of pod spec model where you have that embedded spec and then create the child. And then I assume you've got a child resource controller that will then, when it sees that one created, act upon that.
Yeah. What we also do, if you have something like you need the issuer to, for example, to create the cert, is you could use admission control to validate and see if there is a reference missing or the reference is wrong, then give back the custom resource, give back the request and say, hey, you're missing the issuer. That's what we do, for example, with Open Policy Agent. It's very easy to do. You pull in the list of the first of the dependent and then validate the independent against the dependent.
All right. Anything else on this one? All right, Fatih, hope I got that right. Welcome, says, hi, I'm using Kubernetes for a while. I want to clone an existing cluster. Is there an easy way to do this? I'm on GKE.
What's that old Heptio project?
Valero,
It
right?
is Arc.
It's now called
well,
Valero.
It was Arc, yeah. Now it's called Valero.
It does support GKE, right?
I believe so.
I think so, yeah. Including data.
Correct.
That should be the best practice.
Yep.
Then you need to still take care of, once it's cloned, that your traffic is going the right direction from the outside, and that your clients, like if you have a Jenkins pipeline pushing into that cluster, that it is also going to the right API and not to the old one.
Or you can consider starting to do GitOps and check all your config in Git and make sure that it gets deployed all the time. And then you can easily create a new cluster with the same config any time of the day.
Yeah, that would be even better if you have a pipeline that you can just point to a new cluster and get exactly the same. And you don't need to like back up and restore.
I was going to say, how would you do the data at that point then?
Exactly. The data you still need.
Yeah. Yeah. But that depends on whether you care about the data or not, right? You may have data volumes, but not necessarily have to replicate them. You may have separate way of seeding your databases or doing other things, or you may just use hosted databases, right?
Yeah, I've even seen people connect Kafkas between two clusters and sync them like that because they needed to live migrate. So it's lots of very fun or not so fun options to do things.
Was that a talk at KubeCon or something? That seems infinitely interesting.
No, I've seen that somewhere. I don't know who it was anymore. I think it was a customer of ours.
Oh, okay. All right. Because if anyone has a link to that, I would love to actually read how that went down, because that just sounds...
Most of the use cases I've seen have been less about, less caring about the data and more so just copying and pasting the deployments, in which case I definitely +1 the whole GitOps model. If you need to control or do it like lots of times, that's when I would say you start looking at things like federation and more multi-cluster type work.
Yeah. It's also good if like your first cluster really gets burned down and there is no way you have a recent backup. Being able to restore from scratch to a new API, like someone gives you some Kubernetes API, no matter where it's running, can you get back up? That's always my like best case or worst case scenario training restores. Almost no one can do that, I guess.
Yeah, and then Imran added some blog posts they wrote around Valero, and he moved from bare metal to a cloud provider, looking like they're using Rook and Ceph as well. So interesting links there. Okay, anything else around moving clusters? All right, Oscar Lowe says, late arrival. Hi, all. Started looking at and learning about Kubernetes at the beginning of this year. Excited to learn more and more to work, as I work with it. My team and I are currently working on setting up our stage and production clusters, and we're planning our on-hosting services aimed at both external customers and company internal teams. For the internal services, we have some company demands onto what internal services can be accessible, internal network or VPN or whatever, which are different from the external ones. My question is, would you say namespaces and other built-in separators are enough to set up internal and external services in the same cluster in order to gain the advantages it brings? Or would you say it requires a use of one entire internal cluster and one entirely external cluster to keep things sufficiently separated? I guess here comes the multi-tenancy question.
I was just going to say, that's to me pretty clear cut, especially as spinning up and managing multiple clusters has become easier and easier, and it's only going to get easier. I would just, if you are not comfortable with them being on the same cluster, just split it up. Have 2 clusters. It should be just fine. That's not to say that the technology isn't there to have it all be in one cluster, especially with service meshes and network policies and all the like. But I would just spin up 2 clusters. It's going to be safer. Yeah. You will have a very clear delineated line between them.
It's a lot easier to manage. It can be a lot more secure, especially if you're in some kind of enterprise security department. Then it's just you can even set up different kinds of clusters because one doesn't even need an external load balancer. Can be fully internal. You don't need any external access, and that way you have a lot different, completely different setup, which is quite nice. That said, if you're starting out, it's also actually quite nice to have more clusters because your blast radius is just lower, and wiping a cluster just wipes 1 of 2 and not all of 2.
Less chance for George to fat finger a namespace and remove the wrong thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have the resources, break them up.
Yeah, also when you think about if your like customers are way different and we have different kind of workloads, for example, one could be like mining Bitcoin or something. It could be impacting the other neighbor on the same node. So it's like, I would definitely use different clusters for that.
And please don't mine Bitcoin on clusters.
Yeah.
The big thing is, the big take home
hack, right?
Yeah, is it is possible to do what you want to do with a single cluster, but a lot more work is involved, and in general, it'd be best just have multiple clusters.
Yeah, +1 of separation of concerns. Oscar Lowe says, thanks, great answers. Cheers. Thanks for joining. Stick around, everybody, because we give away the t-shirts at the end. So you have to stick around for the whole show. So moving on, we've got about 20 minutes left. Gilherm, hope I got that right, says, hello, does anyone have any resource articles, papers, books, videos that describes patterns around dynamic application configuration management in Kubernetes? I'm looking for a pattern specifically to share configuration files, a bunch of JSON files, with pods and update them whenever a change in this configuration happens, and then gracefully restart the pods. I wonder if there's something out like this, better opinions, any thoughts? Thank you.
So I replied to this linking a project of mine, Wave. So it was designed for us because we have a bunch of applications that can't dynamically reload their configuration. So the config is stored in config maps. Someone updates the config map, you have to go out and restart the pods. Otherwise, that new configuration doesn't get loaded. So we built this controller, Wave, that looks at config maps and secrets, adds a hash of the data within them to the pod spec on the deployment, or daemon set or stateful set, And then whenever they change, it uses owner references and stuff to watch for changes, updates the pod spec immediately. So as soon as you apply an update to the config map, that should trigger the deployment controller or something to roll out. So I suggested that might be suitable for the use case.
Any other opinions here?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, currently you need some custom controller to do that for you. But basing it on the standard config map is definitely a good idea, because at least you get something there. And maybe that very, very long and still not being worked on issue will at some point be worked on, and we will have native config map rollout functionality somewhere.
Yes, and Miguel points out customize dynamically names the config maps and redeploys deployments. That's good to know.
What we do is we use hashes and roll on the hash of the config map, kind of if the hash changes. But it's also a controller. So
the other thing that I've seen, and this is if you don't want to develop a controller, is essentially just a little simple sidecar that will do like essentially IO notify and restart the process, or like restart the container within the same pod.
Yeah, I think like customize would be like the easiest way, because it's already part of kube control. So yeah, I think like if you use customize and basically use the config map generator feature, it will do the thing.
Yeah, it says it does exactly that. Appends the hashes to the config map.
Cool, I didn't know that.
Based on the content of it. Yeah.
We learn something new every day.
Yeah, and then we have a new release like today-ish. And then
should be today.
Should be today. So good to know. All right, my next question is going to be from Imran, and with that, we are caught up on questions. So if we've missed your question, please repost it. If you have new ones, if you have any follow-ups, I believe we do have a follow-up on the guy with the CNI, Ayush. I believe it looks like they didn't have a CNI, and they're going to give Flannel a shot and get back to us. So that would be awesome. Okay, so if you got more questions, keep them coming. If not, if we run out of questions, we'll just talk about 1.15 for a while or something. But please keep on queuing them up. Imran asks, use case. Oh, is this a follow-up? Hold on, I'm confused here.
No, it's a new one.
Oh, okay. Use case is to okay, so my use case is to restart the deployment pod every night. No changes in spec or image file. How would I go about doing that declaratively? Active deadline seconds didn't work. I believe from 1.15 onwards, it would be easy with kubectl, rollout, restart. Any workarounds for clusters prior to 1.15?
Have something that deletes the pods.
Yeah.
Someone or something. I mean, you can, if you get very, very cheap labor, that might be worth it.
Okay,
most
so
probably
you just kill it and let the scheduler handle it, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, active deadline seconds is, I think, part of jobs. So if it's a pod that could run as a job, then you could have a cron job. But if it just needs to run and just get restarted because of some reason, then currently it's building your own pod killer. I think there is some configurable ones out there. Like maybe even some of the chaos cube thingies, they could be configured to actually do something regularly instead of irregularly.
Also, you could like add another sidecar which just sleeps for like amount of time you need and then exits, and would take down the whole pod.
Any other opinions on this one?
Can't you also like use annotations to force a restart, something like that, like make a dummy change to your pods?
I think annotations are not enough, but dummy changes, there is ways of dummy changing things that actually cause a restart, I remember, but I don't remember which it was.
Changing annotations does not cause a restart.
No, but there is other things that you can change that don't really change but work.
Using an annotation could work. If it depends what owns the pod, but if it's owned by a deployment, if you change an annotation on the pod spec, the deployment controller will count that as a new deployment revision.
So that's what I was was suggesting. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought it was only labels.
Anything, because the way it works, it takes a hash of the pod spec and uses that to check
you're
it.
right.
So literally any change within the pod spec will make that a new rollout.
Yeah, I was thinking friggin' annotation on the deployment itself.
Yeah, Alex just posted Henning's kube janitor. That is usually done to clean up resources, but if you point it to a pod, that would also, and you have a deployment for that, that would also work. It's very easily configurable.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, me too.
That's why I love this show. It's just rehashing the same URLs to ourselves so we remember everything. That's good.
There's a great thread on Discuss for like useful tools like this that they could be reposted to.
Yep, plop that thread in there. If you've got a useful tool that you want to share with the community, we have a long-running thread on the forums that's basically post your cool tools that you're finding on the internet. So he's going to post that link in there. By all means, feel free to submit a few. That's really great. All right. Also, hi, Alex. It's good to see you. Gielherm says, beautiful. Thank you. I'll look into it. You are welcome. JM Richa, I hope I get that right, says, how would I go about swapping out the CNI network of a cluster cleanly, i.e. moving from Flannel to Calico or something to something?
That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, you can devise a plan, right? But essentially, if you have a small number of pods, you can delete one and install the other. Or I think actually, well, it sort of depends as well, right? Which order you do it. But the safer way would be to delete the first one, add a new network, make sure that you are able to start a new pod and it runs on the new network. And once that's been satisfied, you can go and delete all the pods, and then you should get new pods on the new network. It can work, but you obviously are looking at deleting all the pods, and while there's no way to do it without any downtime. Essentially, there'll be downtime and pod-to-pod communication potentially. I mean, in some cases, you may get away without that. If say both of your networks are using let's say AWS VPC or whatever the other native networking options are. So if you were to go from say Flannel in VPC mode to, no, probably not. But I mean, in some cases there may be very special. There may be special cases where things could work without downtime, but that depends which network you're going from to which other network.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have overlay, for example, or if you're using the same overlay, using, I don't know, going from BGP with Calico to BGP with some other one, then you could keep the bird or keep the BGP overlay. And
given the set of details.
It is. I would test this, test the hell out of it, and try some unracy thing. But it's still most probably even creating a new cluster next to it would be easier, or just scheduling a downtime.
Yeah, I was going to say, since we just talked about cloning a cluster, would it be possible to clone a cluster but with a different CNI and then kind of at least get some of the stuff over there that isn't networking related?
Yeah, that'd be one way about sort of doing it.
Yeah. Also, I have like make sure that you don't change pod IP pool, basically CIDR, because if you like use Flannel by default and Calico by default, there are gonna be different IP pools. Then you have to change like controller manager, kubeproxy, and everything. So it's definitely gonna be downtime, I think. So yeah, it's gonna be like really hard. So I would go the route of like creating a new cluster and just migrating workloads.
And if it is a sort of business critical production use case, I'm sure you have support options available where you can contact a network vendor and discuss how they can help you. not all not every CNI implementation available has a network vendor that offers support, but I can vouch for VNet that there are options available, and that I think Calico probably has an option that you can pay for and get support.
All right. Anything else on CNIs? Like, I feel like if I was bare metal at like my business and I had X amount of hardware, right? Clone it into a cloud provider for a little while, then get your stuff all set up, redo it all so you don't have the service downtime, and then move it back down. It feels, that's kind of the flexibility Kubernetes gives you, right? I mean, it's still going to be tough, right? You got to clone, build a new thing, and then clone back. But yeah, this sounds tough. Any other comments on this one? But I'm really interested. I'm really interested in what approach you take, and if you have any notes, I would like to. So please feel free to get back with us. Okay, let's see. Oscar Lowe, we're going to put your question last. Martin 31821 asks, is it possible to hint services to refer local IE on the same node pods? I'm using IPVS on 1.14.2, maybe changing the IPVS scheduler to SED? Question mark?
So this is very similar to a question we had last time where we came up with the external traffic policy local setting. So I don't know if that's IPVS compatible. Maybe it is. But at least in the IP tables implementation, what it does is it makes sure that if traffic comes from externally into the node and the pod is on that node, then it will serve traffic. If there's no pod on that node for the service, then it just black holes the traffic. So if you have health checks on your load balancer, it should only mark nodes which actually have a pod for that service as active, and therefore only route the traffic to them, and then it will stay local. I don't know for pod to pod what the implications are. And I also don't know if that works with IPVS, but give it a go.
I believe it does work with IPVS, but it should only impact, again, like external traffic to at least to my knowledge. The internal service will still essentially function the same.
Yeah.
I think there was a networking thing that came up about this and preferring like local, before, like if the pods are running on the same host, prefer going to a pod running on that host. I don't remember where I saw it.
Yeah, there's definitely work on that. At least there should be some proposal. I've seen that too. I don't remember where, but I'm pretty sure there is work on that, but it's not out yet.
Do you think there might be a KEP that we can reference?
Yep, I'm looking through them right now.
Awesome.
Sweet. And while we do that, we're going to do the last question. Let's do a quick last call. If anybody has a last question, feel free to whack it in there. In the meantime, we'll do Oscar Lowe's. Do you have a favorite ingress controller or one you're hopeful for in the future? And if so, which one?
Ooh, that's political. I would say it depends a lot on your use case. What I'm seeing a lot, I mean, we run the Nginx ingress controller, the community one, and we're quite happy with that. We have people running traffic. They're also happy with that. Contour, I've seen tons of people who are happy with that.
Could someone
Ambassador, maybe?
Yep. Could someone toss a link to traffic in the chat? Because I know that's spelled differently for people.
It's TRAEFIK. But yeah. So I really like traffic, even though I don't use it in production. But when I played with it, it was super shiny and seemed really cool. And another one that I kind of want to play with more is Contour. But for production, we currently use the Nginx ingress.
Ooh, they're having a follow-up question. Which use cases fit best for which ingress controllers?
So, for example, we use traffic, and one problem of traffic, it's just only L7. Like, I think at Nginx you can use both L4 and L7 traffic in order to basically send the packets into the correct destination.
Yeah, it has a workaround for TCP UDP. If you give it more ports, you can assign those ports to a service, which is nice.
But it is kind of cumbersome to deal with because you're actually dealing with a completely separate config map. I'm doing that as well, and it's gross.
Yeah, we even have a controller that is managing that thing.
Just dropped a link to the CubeDex article where they compare all the features of all the main Ingress controllers, so you can kind of take a look and evaluate for yourself.
Oh, cool.
And if you're in the cloud, sometimes the call might be to just use the cloud load balancer for some things. Like we've experienced, for example, if you have tons of open WebSocket connections, like we had 5 million concurrent WebSocket connections, that's almost a case where none of the software load balancers without extensive tweaking works. And just paying a few bucks for even a classic ELB fixed it, basically, right? And that is sometimes an option, but it's only an option on the clouds and not for all services, I guess.
All right. Anything else on this before we wrap it up?
I found the cap.
Ooh, yes, I saw you toss that link, and then I will toss the notes, the links, and all that stuff on the show notes in the discuss thread for this. Okay, and with that, it is time for the raffle. So Jeff, we're giving away 2 shirts. So I hope you can roll twice because we don't have a West Coast session today. We're going to try to bring back the West Coast edition for those of you that are listening in. We're just trying to find a time that fits for West Coasters that isn't right after lunch. So we're looking at how we can best do that. But in the meantime, we'll keep on rocking with the EU session. So I'd like to thank all of you who joined us. We had 90 people join us today, so thank you very much. And we will toss. I mean, who are our winners, Jeff?
I was going to toss them in the chat, and
Sure,
I was also like counting down the list.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But there you go.
Yep. So J.M. Richa and Tarun Pathilpati. Hope I get that right. So how does one enter the raffle? You just have to ask the question, and we automatically put your name in a thing. And then Jeff does this Dungeons and Dragons roll, and we figure out who it is, and then that's good. But keep on coming back. We'll always roll. We'll always do a new raffle. If you show up a lot, and I notice you, I might just send you a shirt out of the blue. I've done it before. So with that, I will PM those 2 of you that have won and get you a CNCF store code. And with that, any last words, panel? We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Next session will be always 3rd Wednesday of the month. So that is going to be July 17th, and I will be in Greece that day. So we will figure something out, but we'll get you a host or something like that. With that, thanks, panelists. Any last word, panelists?
Keep being awesome.
Yep. Thanks, Pavlis. Your first time. Imran as well. We really appreciate your participation. If you want to be on this panel, this is all volunteers only. So feel free to ping us. And everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Later, all.